here we go. Godzilla movie tier list. All right, you guys know how it works. S is God tier, F is shit tier, and then there's everything in between. All right. Okay, here we go. Godzilla 1954, easy, S tier. Easy. The one that started it all holds up to this day, will probably hold up forever because of the narrative, because of what made this film come into existence, the meaning behind it. It's a masterpiece. Will always be a masterpiece. Godzilla raids again, F tier. Sucks. King Kong versus Godzilla. Now, I'm going to try and judge this one objectively. Personally, I think it's D tier, but I know a lot of people like it, so I'll take fans into consideration and I'll put it in C tier. It's a little bit goofy. The Godzilla suit is pretty bad. Kong suit is even worse. And yeah. Godzilla vs. Mothra, B tier. This is probably one of the better Showa Godzilla vs. movies. I think it has a pretty decent story. I think the fight scene between Mothra and Godzilla is awesome. And the little baby caterpillars coming out of nowhere, strategically beating Godzilla is, I guess if you're a Godzilla fan, it's a low light, but it is a cool concept on how they kind of show the underdog defeating the gargantuan by using smarts and teamwork. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. This is another one. Now, I want to put this in B tier, but I'm going to put it in C tier. Simply because while the ending of this movie is fucking epic in my opinion, because it's like maybe the only, or one of the, let me see, is it the only movie where Rodan, Godzilla, and Mothra team up? Probably. I don't know. Nah, Destroy All Monsters, they teamed up as well, but that's a little bit different circumstance. But this is one of my all-time favorites. But the story is pretty stupid, as are many Toho Godzilla movies. And Godzilla and Rodan being translated for by the Mothra twins is on a whole nother level. Monster Zero. This is definitely B tier. Another solid Showa versus movie. UFO stuff is awesome. Yeah, I think definitely Monster Zero is B tier. Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. F. I don't even have to explain that. Son of Godzilla. F. Don't gotta explain that. Destroy all monsters. I'm sorry, it's the early Avengers of Toho Showa movies. A tier. This epic to see all those monsters together on one screen. Godzilla's Revenge, or All Monsters All Out Attack. F tier. Godzilla vs. Smog Monster. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to give it a B tier. And I'll tell you why. I think this movie's highly underrated. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. What actually makes this movie kind of corny is Godzilla himself. If you haven't seen Godzilla vs. Smog Monster in a while, go back, watch the movie, and skip or try to cut out all the scenes with Godzilla. And it actually kind of turns into a creepy horror thriller about a monster that just shits all over people and turns them into bones. It's hard to believe, but Godzilla actually makes this movie worse. Godzilla vs. Gigan, I'm going to give it a D because stock footage. Stock footage and talking monsters and Anguirus running headfirst into Gigan's buzzsaw. That alone makes this a fucking D tier movie. Oh yeah, and cockroaches. Yeah. Yeah, D. The only reason it doesn't get less than that is because Ghidorah and Gigan are in it. Godzilla vs. Megalon. I think this is an underappreciated movie. I'm going to give it C. I think that Jet Jaguar's cool. The Jet Jaguar song should have been nominated for a Grammy. Godzilla does a dropkick. And this is probably the first movie that portrayed... Well, it's not the first movie that... Well, I mean, it is, but... What I'm trying to say is that the American box cover for this movie was awesome. Obviously, that changes things and after 2001, but at the time it came out, the cover for this movie was awesome. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Our first, or second rather, A-tier verse movie. I love the fantasy aspect of the story in this one, with the whole sun rising and setting. King Caesar is probably the weak point of this movie, in my opinion. But the concept of Mechagodzilla, how he was disguised, how he ripped open Anguirus' jaw. You know, Anguirus, he's such a bitch. It's like, is there any movie where he has a fighting chance? Terror of Mechagodzilla. B tier only because it's not as good as the first movie, but still a solid Godzilla versus movie, and Mechagodzilla is awesome. But I like the story in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla better. The you know, the fantasy, the ancient lore, and all that. Godzilla 1984. A tier. I know a lot of people thought I put it in S. Here's why I won't. As much as I love this movie, and I do love it, make no mistake about that, the strength of this movie is its consistency, some incredible scenes, but overall, when you really sit back and watch the movie, what really was Godzilla's purpose? By the time you would have even had a chance of figuring that out, they led him into a volcano with a bunch of birds. Hey, I can criticize the movies I love. With that said, I love the suit. The scene at the port where he blows away the military is one of the most devastating scenes I've ever seen. And the build up to his arrival is absolutely phenomenal. Godzilla vs. Biollante. I'll go B tier on this one. If you had asked anyone 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, they probably would put it at D. I think B is probably its height. I still think it's a little bit crazy that a scientist decided to merge like Godzilla cells with a rose and I think, what was it, the spirit of his daughter? It's a little funky, but the monster's unique. The second form, the first form looks absolutely stupid. I'm sorry. A giant rose sitting in the middle of the lake, getting plastered by atomic breath. But that second form, holy shit. Second form is epic. Took Godzilla to the limit. But some of the story beats were pretty dumb. Godzilla versus Ghidorah. King Ghidorah. I love King Ghidorah, but I don't love this movie. I'm going to give it a D. Here's my problem with this movie. Number one, as much as we all love the M11 character, everything about that was dumb. It was just dumb. King Ghidorah getting owned within the first 20 minutes of the movie is sad. And this is where I started having my beef with Toho on how they treat King Ghidorah. He never quite felt like the threat that he always should have felt like. Even in the earlier movies, Godzilla always owned that ass. In fact, I'm going to put it on record and I'm going to say straight up, Legendary did a better job with King Ghidorah than Toho did in terms of representing his power and strength. I mean, in King of the Monsters, Godzilla had to go Super Saiyan with Mothra's power infused in him just to beat King Ghidorah. In Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and Heisei, one atomic breath to the center head took him down. That is absolute rubbish. And here's the thing. You can get mad about what I just said, but it ain't a lie. It's not a lie. And then he comes back as a mecha and gets his ass beat again. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that Legendary did a better job representing Ghidorah than Toho ever has. That's just a fact. Okay, Godzilla Mothra Battle for Earth. I'll give this one a C. Actually, you know what? No. I think some people like this more than I'm going to put it an F. Here's why. Number one, I'm tired of seeing Mothra beat Godzilla's ass. Number two, Batra. Really? Batra? So, Godzilla, who has always got his ass handed to him by Mothra, it's not bad enough that he's got to deal with Mothra. Now he's got to deal with a fucking bat who was Mothra's enemy, and then they decide to just put their bygones aside and basically bully Godzilla in this movie. It's just a shit movie, I think. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. This one is quite a watch. I'm going to put this one in A tier. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is really good. Mechagodzilla put a good hurting on Godzilla in this movie. I like the Rodan dynamic. Even though Rodan was kind of tiny in this shit, it kind of just nerfed him. But this is one of the better Heisei movies. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is really, really good. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. F. Piece of shit. First of all, I don't like kitty monsters, and the little baby Godzilla looking all cutesy and then getting kidnapped by basically a doppelganger with, large trap. This is just a shit movie. It's a shit movie overall. I don't care what anyone says. I know there's a lot of people who like Space Godzilla. Fuck Space Godzilla. This movie was just a cash grab. I mean, they're all cash grabs, let's be honest. But this was like low effort. They just made another Godzilla and gave him big traps. So he's been spending time in the gym. Then you have this little baby Godzilla that just looks like a fucking Pokemon. And then you got this robot that is supposed to be this is supposed to be like at that time, obviously futuristic compared to the Showa era. So explain to me why Mechagodzilla from the 70s looks more advanced than this fucking Mogira. Shit movie. Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Definitely A tier. A good ending to what I believe to be a mediocre overall Heisei era. But it was very good. I think Destroyer is one of the best designed villains they've ever made. And I think this one's solid. This is solid overall. All right. Godzilla 98. It's going to go into C tier. Simply for being better than about 65% of the Toho movies just in story alone. I know Godzilla fans don't like the design, But let's be honest, the storyline of this movie is better than about 65 to 70% of Toho movies. That alone puts it in the C tier. Godzilla 2000. D tier. He's short, he's stubby, his dorsal plates are exaggeratingly big. He looks like a rat, and he's fighting what looks like a fucking Pokemon up until the last 5 minutes of the movie, where he's fighting a very bloated, swollen monster with basically a fucking head cheese of a monster. It's like all head and 2 legs. It's like he was fighting, what's that damn Pokemon that comes out of the ground and there's like 3 of them? There's like all head and like little feet. Starts with a D. I forgot the name. Diglett, yeah. So basically he fights a mutated Diglett at the end of the movie after fighting like his pre-evolved form. So, yeah, Doug Trio Diglett, whichever you want to call it. That's basically what he fought. A Diglett with legs. Yeah, not a great movie at all. I will say, though, the reason I put it in D and not F, the ending sequence when the credits are rolling up is fucking awesome. Godzilla vs. Mogira. I think this is slightly underrated. I'm going to give this one a C. The problem with this movie is that it gets boring fast. But the build-up to Mogira is actually very good, and there's actually a horror element to it. But the problem is, once we get to Mogira, the battle between Mogira and Godzilla is actually pretty poor. So it would have been ranked higher if the movie had more consistency on the back end. But the early part of the movie leading up to Mogira finally arriving was actually pretty good. Actually, very good. Excuse me, yeah, Megaguirus. He has like 3 names though, as he evolves. But I kept saying Mogira, and that's the name of the fucking, the other thing. But anyway, my point is, leading up to Megaguirus coming around, I thought the build up to that was really good. But unfortunately, it stalled after that. GMK. Yeah, GMK is definitely B tier. Solid movie. Very evil Godzilla. I know people are like, well, wait a minute, why is it there? Well, here's the thing. I like seeing Godzilla powerful, don't get me wrong, but none of these monsters presented a challenge for him. And I'm sorry, it's kind of weird to see Ghidorah as a good guy. That didn't rub me the right way. Not only have you been shitting on one of my favorite villains all this time, but now you're gonna try and convince me he's a good guy? Yeah, that doesn't work for me. Baragon should not have been in this movie. I'm sorry. That's another point off. And Mothra, I'm sorry, is overused. They should have went with the original roster. I would have been happier with that. Had it been the original roster, I probably would have given it an A. But I still think even with those flaws, it's definitely a solid movie. No, it's certainly not an S. Let's not get crazy now. Come on. All right, Godzilla X Mechagodzilla again. I like this one. I'm gonna give this one an A. I like the idea of the spirit bones of Godzilla kind of intervening with the futuristic design of Kiryu. And hold on one second. Okay. I like that concept. I thought it was a pretty good concept. I think Kiryu's pretty cool. I think this was one of the more solid Millennium ones. Now going back thinking on it, because I'm not very high on the Millennium era, but I think this was a good concept. Oh God, SOS, F. I'm tired of Mothra. At this point, I'm tired of Mothra. All right, Godzilla Final Wars. Fun factor and kind of like an all-star. I'm gonna give this one a B. I just think it's a fun movie. You get to see all the monsters. You get to see Godzilla fight all the monsters. It is goofy, it is out there, but it is a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites of the Millennium era, and I think it's a solid B just on the entertainment factor alone. All right, now we move into the more recent movies. Okay. Godzilla 2014. This is going in the 8th. Actually, it probably deserves an A. I'm going to put it in the S tier for a multitude of reasons. Number one, in terms of the movie, while the narrative wasn't very strong, this movie had a very strong Act 1 and a very, very powerful Act 3. But beyond that is what the movie represents to what we're currently enjoying. This movie turns out to be the start of what is now a renaissance, a new renaissance for the Godzilla IP. And it all starts with this one. I think that means something. It means a lot to me. I do think that it's one of the strongest endings in a Godzilla movie when you consider how long it took for them to build up. I know there's a lot of people who don't like 2014. I know there's a lot of people. I really think if it wasn't for Aaron Taylor Johnson, fucking up his acting for this movie, I do think it would have come off a lot better. Biggest mistake in this movie, killing off Bryan Cranston. I know there's a lot of people who don't like the cutaways and the teases of Godzilla. I think that plays perfectly to delivering what felt like a very powerful ending. And I think that deserves a spot up there. Because if it weren't for this movie, we would not be enjoying what we're enjoying today. And that has to count for something. So, yeah. All right. Shin Gojira. I'm going to be fair about this one to the people who love the movie. If I was judging this on my own, I'd probably give it a D. But because there's a lot of people out there who like it, I'm going to go ahead and give it a B. Godzilla is not the problem in this movie. The problem with this movie is that they decided to make a narrative that does not include a main character. And that's hard to get behind. Especially now, looking at -1, it makes that even more evident. Okay, so now we're getting into the Godzilla animated trilogy. Part 1 in the animated trilogy. I'm actually going to give this one a C. I did not dislike this movie at all. I thought it was a little slow. I thought there was... I didn't like the main voice actor for the main character. But I thought it was a decent start to what I was hoping would be a good trilogy. Unfortunately, that leads us to City on the Edge of Battle. Absolute fucking F. Absolute F. Not only did they cock tease a character that wasn't in the movie, they turned him into a fucking Metropolis. A dead one at that. That fires a couple of missiles at Godzilla. So yeah, absolute rubbish. And finally, the last one in the animated trilogy does not fare much better. It's going into the D category. I don't even understand the ending of this movie. Like, what was the point of that? Flying, this kamikazing, like, what was that for? It's dumb shit. Absolute dumb shit. All right. All right, I'm going to move Singular Point back here, and I'm going to move Monarch back here because we're not counting those. Okay, Godzilla King of the Monsters from the Monsterverse. I'm going to put this in a B tier. While first of all, the jokes were dumb. I think we can all acknowledge that. The choice to cloud everything in shadow and blue was a bad choice. What was done well was designing and reimagining the Toho monsters that were in this movie. They put their own spin, but kept the strong spirit and the original look of the monsters in the movie from their older versions. And that end battle scene was epic. The Rodan scene is probably one of the best monster scenes alone in any monster movie that ever existed. That Rodan sequence in King of the Monsters alone is probably the best kaiju scene ever put on film. Honestly, it's that good, at least in my opinion. Oh yeah, and the music. Yeah, let's not forget the music. All right, Godzilla versus Kong. I'm probably gonna rank this higher than I want to, but I have to acknowledge what it did for the time it came out. I'm putting Godzilla vs. Kong in an A tier, and the reason I'm doing that is not only because it's a fun movie, not only is it the first time we've seen these two fighting each other in however so many years and decades, but I kind of feel like this really put the kaiju genre and Godzilla and even Kong into the stratosphere. I feel like after this movie, things went up another level. Where 2014, how that built up Godzilla over time and all this content started coming out, I kind of feel like Godzilla vs. Kong took that and then took it to the next level. And that, again, to me, that stands for something. That means something, because as a person who has gone through 4 kaiju-less stints in my life, I personally put a lot of value on what can impact the kaiju genre to make it last longer. And right now, to me, 2014 and Godzilla vs. Kong are the 2 movies that have given us, combined, have given us this kind of longevity. And to me, that counts for something. Plus, the movies are good. Finally, Godzilla -1. I absolutely love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. And after giving it a lot of thought, I cannot put it in the S tier. I just can't do it. But it is going into A tier. This is one of the best movies Toho has made in many years. And I'll put it at S tier up front. Let's put it up here. Let's make it number 1. I'll put this number 2. I just can't. That last act and some of the blemishes in the middle of the movie were too. I just can't give it an S tier for that. I know there's a lot of people who love the movie and they're gonna rock. Oh, this is S tier. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sorry. I gotta critique what's there. Okay, the last act is very poor. All right. There are some decisions made throughout the movie that were not good decisions, okay? Basically having, oh God, it's been so long since I watched the movie that I can't remember the guy's name. But having the main character teleport to the girl in the middle of the Godzilla attack was absolutely, I mean, that was just fucking crazy, okay? The tugboats teleporting, connecting to the big boats in a matter of like half a second was poor. The concept and the idea of trying to get rid of Godzilla with a makeshift group of a community. When you establish Godzilla as the kind of threat that they did in this movie, and then you have a bunch of ragtag people coming together with a bunch of fishing boats, try to take him out. And it almost worked. I thought that was a little absurd. And the problem was that last act was going up a very strong, very powerful, very well acted, very well paced first 2 acts of the movie. That, you know, as I've thought about it more and more over time, that last act did a lot more damage than I even realized initially. In fact, I think that last act is pretty bad. I almost was going to give this a B, to be honest. I almost put -1 in the B tier. All right. But I don't want people to start committing suicide. Okay. Or, you know. But overall, it is one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. I just don't think it's ever going to be as good as 54. And it's not going to ever have the cultural impact that 2014 had because it came out 10 years too late. Not to mention 2014 has a stronger ending than -1. Easily. And I'll tell you why too, because I know people are gonna say, oh, but what about when they get reunited and that shit on her neck? Well, that's all fine and well, but if you're paying attention to the movie and you see the scene where the black rain comes down, you already know their fate at that point. So for me, the ending is a moot point because I already know that these fuckers are dead halfway through the movie. So Godzilla's 24's ending is more impactful, is more entertaining, is more fun, and -1's ending is just kind of putting the last clamp on Stitches, because the last act to me is that bad. It's that the pacing on the last act is horrible. They took way too much time setting up the plan to stop him. I mean, they really fucked up with that last act. Sorry, they just did. And there you have it. There's my tier list. Pretty sure you already pissed people off when you said G98 is better than 65% of Toho movies. Narratively speaking, it is. That's the key word though. I said narratively. I'm still wondering what story G98 had. I didn't say it was a good story. I said it was better than 65 to 70% of Toho stories. Once again, you're putting words in my mouth. I never said 98 was great. I never said 98 was great, and I never said 98 had a good story. I said it has a better story than most Toho movies. I'm making it very clear. Don't put words in my mouth. I only put Shin in the B tier because I know a lot of people liked it. But in all honesty, it probably should be in D tier. Yeah, I think Shin is overrated. And I do think to some degree Godzilla -1 is overrated too. I mean, the way people just glow about that movie, and it has very clear flaws. It is not a perfect movie. By far. It's a very good movie. It is miles ahead of Shin Gojira. But man, that third act is... I'm surprised people are so forgiving for that third act. A Godzilla movie director tier list? All right, now you guys are asking too much. I don't even know who directed 80% of the movies. And the reason I don't is because